Picture a world where the sun beats down on a dusty city square, where the air is thick with the scent of fear, and where justice is not a quiet verdict but a scream that echoes through time. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, where the first laws were written not in ink but in blood. What kind of society would craft punishments so brutal that their stories still haunt us, thousands of years later? Today, we're diving deep into the shadows of Mesopotamian justice, uncovering the cruelest of their brutal punishments: flaying, impalement, and beyond. These aren't just tales of pain. They're mysteries woven into the fabric of history, stories of rebellion, betrayal, and divine wrath that will grip your soul and leave you questioning the very nature of humanity. Whether you're driving through the night, working at your desk, or craving a story that teeters on the edge of horror, settle in. Let's unravel the brutal punishments of ancient Mesopotamia and the secrets they've buried in the sands of time. Mesopotamia, the land cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was where humanity took its first steps toward civilization. From 3500 to 500 BCE, city-states like Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria rose and fell, their ziggurats piercing the sky, their cuneiform tablets preserving the earliest laws. But beneath the grandeur of their temples and palaces lies a darker truth. Justice in ancient Mesopotamia was not about fairness, it was about control, fear, and spectacle. The people of this ancient world believed that punishment wasn't just for the guilty. It was a message to the living, a warning carved in flesh and blood. To understand these brutal punishments, we must step into their world, a place where gods demanded sacrifice, kings ruled as their earthly shadows, and the law was as merciless as the rivers that sustained them. This is a journey into historical torture, a descent into the heart of a society that thrived on order but was haunted by chaos. Let's begin with one of the most horrifying punishments in Mesopotamian history: flaying. Imagine the bustling city of Uruk, its markets alive with the chatter of traders, priests chanting hymns to the goddess Inanna, children darting through the streets. But in the heart of the city, a different scene unfolds. A man stands bound to a wooden post, his wrists chafed raw by coarse ropes. He's a thief, perhaps, or a rebel who dared to challenge the king's divine authority. The crowd gathers, their faces a mix of fear and fascination, knowing what's about to happen. The executioner steps forward, his bronze knife catching the sunlight. Flaying, the act of stripping a person's skin while they're still alive, was reserved for crimes that threatened the very fabric of society: treason, sacrilege, or rebellion. The Code of Hammurabi, etched around 1754 BCE, doesn't explicitly mention flaying, but Assyrian kings, centuries later, boasted of it in their inscriptions. Why flay someone alive? It wasn't just about inflicting pain. It was about erasing their humanity, peeling away the barrier that made them a person, leaving only a symbol of the king's unyielding power. The process of flaying was a study in cruelty, a ritual as precise as it was horrific. The executioner would begin with small, deliberate incisions, perhaps at the wrists or ankles, using a blade honed to razor sharpness. The skin would be pulled back slowly, each movement calculated to maximize suffering. The victim's screams would fill the air, a sound that carried across the city, a reminder to all who heard it. The goal wasn't a quick death. It was a prolonged performance, a spectacle that could last hours. Assyrian kings like Ashurnasirpal II, who ruled in the 9th century BCE, took pride in this brutality. One of his inscriptions, carved into the walls of his palace at Nimrud, declares, "I flayed their nobles and draped their skins over the city's pillars." Picture that for a moment. Human skin, stretched and displayed like a grotesque tapestry, fluttering in the desert wind. This wasn't just punishment. It was psychological warfare, a message that defiance would cost you everything: your body, your dignity, your place in the world. But why was flaying so central to Mesopotamian justice? To answer that, we need to understand the society itself. Mesopotamia was a land of constant tension: city-states warring for dominance, invasions from nomadic tribes, internal rebellions threatening fragile thrones. Kings needed to assert their authority, not just over enemies but over their own people. Flaying was a tool of terror, a way to say, "This is what happens when you cross me." It wasn't enough to kill. The punishment had to be unforgettable, a story that would echo through generations. And it did. Even now, the idea of flaying sends a chill through us, a testament to its enduring horror. But there's more to it than fear. Flaying had a symbolic weight. In Mesopotamian belief, the body was a gift from the gods, a vessel for the soul. To strip away the skin was to desecrate that gift, to curse the victim not just in life but in the afterlife, where they might wander as a restless spirit, forever marked by their shame. Let's explore a specific story that brings this punishment to life. In the city of Nineveh, around 700 BCE, during the reign of King Sennacherib, Cuneiform tablets describe a mass punishment following a rebellion. The tablets speak of hundreds flayed and impaled, their bodies displayed along the banks of the Tigris River. But here's the mystery. The tablets don't name the rebels or their crime. Were they political dissidents plotting against the king? Foreign captives from a conquered city? Or perhaps followers of a rival god, challenging the Assyrian pantheon? The silence is unusual for Assyrian records, which typically revel in the details of victory. Some historians speculate this was a deliberate omission, a way to erase the rebels from history, their identities stripped as completely as their skins. Others believe the punishment was so severe that even the scribes feared to record the full truth, lest they anger the gods or invite their own doom. This mystery lingers like a shadow, a reminder that even the most powerful kings couldn't fully control the stories they left behind. Now, let's turn to another punishment that was equally terrifying: impalement. If flaying was about erasing identity, impalement was about displaying it for all to see. Imagine a dusty road leading to the city of Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Along the path, wooden stakes rise from the ground, each bearing a writhing figure, their bodies pierced through the torso. Impalement involved driving a sharpened stake through a victim's body, often vertically, from the base of the spine upward, and then raising the stake upright, leaving the victim suspended in agony. Assyrian kings like Shalmaneser III, who ruled in the 9th century BCE, used impalement to punish rebels and captives, their bodies lining the roads to their cities like grim markers. The stake was carefully positioned to avoid vital organs, ensuring the victim suffered for hours, sometimes days, before death claimed them. The crowd would watch, some in horror, others in silent acceptance, knowing this was the price of defiance. Impalement was more than a punishment. It was a spectacle of power. The raised stake turned the victim into a living or dying monument, a public display of the king's wrath. In a society where literacy was rare, these visual warnings were a language everyone understood. The sight of a body impaled outside the city gates sent a clear message: obedience was non-negotiable. But there's a deeper layer to impalement's use. Some scholars suggest it had a ritualistic purpose, tied to Mesopotamian beliefs about the afterlife. The gods, like Enlil and Marduk, were seen as judges of the dead, and a body desecrated by impalement might be denied peace in the underworld. This added a spiritual terror to the physical pain, making the punishment even more horrifying to a people who feared the wrath of their deities as much as their kings. To deepen our understanding, let's explore the broader context of Mesopotamian society. This was a land of contrasts: beauty and brutality, order and chaos. Its people built towering ziggurats to honor their gods, yet they also crafted punishments that rivaled the worst nightmares. Why? The answer lies in the fragility of their world. City-states like Babylon and Assur were surrounded by enemies, from nomadic tribes to rival kingdoms. Internally, they faced constant threats: rebellions, famines, floods that could sweep away entire cities. Kings needed to maintain order at all costs, and brutal punishments like flaying and impalement were their tools. These acts weren't random cruelty. They were calculated displays of power, designed to shock and subdue. But they also reflected the Mesopotamian worldview. Their gods were not gentle deities. They were forces of nature, capable of creation and destruction. Human justice mirrored divine justice, with punishments that echoed the gods' unforgiving nature. Let's dive into the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest known legal codes, to see how punishment was structured. Written around 1754 BCE, the code is a window into Babylonian society, outlining penalties for everything from theft to adultery. While it doesn't explicitly mention flaying or impalement, it reveals a system where punishment was tailored to status and crime. A free man who struck another might pay a fine or lose a hand, but a slave faced harsher consequences: mutilation, branding, or death. This hierarchy shows that Mesopotamian justice was deeply unequal. Nobles and priests often escaped the worst punishments, while commoners and slaves bore the brunt. Flaying and impalement, however, were reserved for high-profile crimes: treason, rebellion, or sacrilege, because they required a spectacle to reinforce the social order. A merchant caught cheating might lose an ear, but a rebel threatening the king's divine mandate faced a fate that would echo through the ages. Now, let's explore another tale, one that blends history with the supernatural. In the city of Ur, around 2000 BCE, archaeologists uncovered clay tablets describing a cursed execution. The story tells of a man, possibly a high-ranking official, who was impaled for an unnamed crime. The tablets claim his spirit refused to rest, his screams haunting the city at night. Priests performed rituals to appease the ghost, burning offerings and chanting hymns, but the hauntings continued, leading to the abandonment of a temple. Was this a true supernatural event, or a story crafted to explain the temple's decline? Mesopotamians believed in restless spirits, and a botched execution could anger the gods, unleashing chaos. This tale, whether fact or fiction, reveals the spiritual weight of punishment in Mesopotamia. It wasn't just about the living. It was about the dead, the gods, and the delicate balance of the cosmos. Let's take a closer look at the psychological impact of these punishments. Flaying and impalement weren't just about the victim. They were about the audience. Crowds gathered to witness these spectacles, not out of sadism but out of necessity. In a world without newspapers or televisions, public punishment was how rulers communicated power. The sight of a flayed body or an impaled rebel was a visceral reminder of the king's reach. But it also created a culture of fear, where dissent was unthinkable and conformity was survival. Some scholars argue this fear shaped Mesopotamian religion, with gods depicted as vengeful judges who demanded constant appeasement. The line between divine and human punishment blurred, creating a society where every act carried eternal consequences. To illustrate this, let's consider the story of Enheduanna, a priestess in the city of Ur around 2300 BCE. She's one of the earliest known poets, her hymns to Inanna preserved on clay tablets. But her life wasn't all poetry and prayer. Cuneiform fragments suggest she was accused of defying the temple's authority, possibly for political reasons. Her punishment, though not fully detailed, may have involved public humiliation or a symbolic flaying not of her skin, but of her status. Her poems speak of exile and suffering, hinting at a punishment that left her spiritually scarred. Was she a victim of intrigue, targeted by rivals jealous of her influence? Or did she truly challenge the gods? The mystery endures, but her story shows that Mesopotamian punishment could be as psychological as it was physical, stripping away identity and legacy in ways that lingered beyond death. Let's explore another layer of Mesopotamian justice: the role of the gods. In Mesopotamia, every punishment was a dialogue with the divine. Kings ruled as intermediaries of the gods, and their laws were seen as extensions of divine will. A criminal wasn't just breaking human law, they were defying the cosmic order. Flaying and impalement, with their extreme brutality, were ways to appease the gods, to restore balance to a world teetering on chaos. But this belief also created a paradox. If the gods demanded such cruelty, what did that say about their nature? Mesopotamian myths are filled with stories of gods punishing humanity: floods, plagues, and divine wrath. Human punishments like flaying and impalement mirrored these stories, reflecting a worldview where suffering was a path to order. Let's dive into another mystery, this one from the city of Babylon around 1800 BCE. Cuneiform records describe a series of executions following a failed coup against the king. The rebels were flayed and impaled, their bodies displayed outside the city gates. But the records are incomplete, with gaps that leave historians puzzled. Why were the rebels' names omitted? Were they erased to prevent their cause from inspiring others? Or was the truth too dangerous to record? Some speculate the coup was tied to a religious schism, with the rebels worshipping a rival god. Others believe it was a power struggle within the royal family, hushed up to protect the dynasty's image. The truth is lost, but the story lingers, a reminder that punishment in Mesopotamia was as much about controlling narrative as it was about controlling people. To deepen our exploration, let's consider the social structure of Mesopotamia and how it shaped these brutal punishments. Society was rigidly hierarchical, with kings and priests at the top, followed by nobles, merchants, commoners, and slaves. Punishments reflected this hierarchy. A noble who committed a crime might face exile or a fine, while a slave could be mutilated or killed for the same offense. Flaying and impalement were reserved for crimes that threatened the entire system: rebellion, treason, or sacrilege. These punishments weren't just about the individual, they were about preserving the social order. By making an example of a rebel, the king reinforced his divine authority and reminded everyone of their place. Let's explore another story, this one from the city of Assur around 1000 BCE. A tablet describes a punishment so horrific it was said to anger the gods. A group of prisoners, accused of stealing sacred artifacts, were subjected to a rare double punishment: flayed alive, then impaled. The tablet claims the city suffered a series of misfortunes afterward: crop failures, floods, and strange omens. Priests declared the gods were punishing the city for the execution's cruelty. Was this divine retribution, or a convenient explanation for natural disasters? The Mesopotamians believed the gods watched every act, and a punishment too brutal could tip the cosmic balance. This story, whether true or not, shows how punishment in Mesopotamia was a high-stakes game, where the line between justice and hubris was dangerously thin. Let's take a step back and examine the tools of punishment. The executioners of Mesopotamia were skilled craftsmen, their instruments designed for precision. The bronze knives used for flaying were honed to cut cleanly, ensuring the skin could be removed in large sheets. Stakes for impalement were carved from sturdy wood, often cedar, and sharpened to a fine point. These tools weren't just practical. They were symbolic. The knife represented the king's ability to strip away rebellion. The stake symbolized his power to elevate suffering into a public spectacle. The executioners themselves were often trained professionals, their role both feared and respected. In some cases, they were priests blending divine ritual with human cruelty, ensuring the punishment pleased both the king and the gods. Let's explore another mystery. This one tied to the city of Lagash around 2100 BCE. Cuneiform records describe a series of punishments following a dispute over water rights, a critical issue in a land dependent on irrigation. The guilty were flayed. Their skins hung in the temple of Ningirsu, the city's patron god. But the records hint at something strange. The flaying was accompanied by a ritual chant, suggesting the punishment was part of a larger ceremony. Was this a sacrifice to appease the gods for the city's survival? Or was it a political move using religion to justify brutality? The tablets don't say, leaving us to wonder about the true purpose of this gruesome act. This mystery highlights the blurred line between justice and ritual in Mesopotamia, where every punishment carried a deeper meaning. Now, let's consider the role of the crowd in these spectacles. Public punishment was a communal event, drawing people from all walks of life: merchants, farmers, priests, and children. They gathered not out of sadism but out of necessity, to witness the king's power and reaffirm their place in society. The crowd's reaction was part of the punishment's effectiveness. Their gasps, their silence, their fear amplified the message. But what did it feel like to stand in that crowd, watching a man flayed alive or impaled on a stake? Did they feel horror, pity, or grim satisfaction? Some scholars suggest these spectacles created a shared trauma, binding the community through fear. Others argue they desensitized the people, normalizing violence as a fact of life. Either way, the crowd was not just a witness. It was a participant in the theater of justice. Let's dive into another tale, this one from the city of Mari around 1800 BCE. A cuneiform tablet describes a woman accused of witchcraft, a serious crime in a society that feared supernatural threats. She was impaled outside the city walls, her body left as a warning to others. But the tablet hints at a mystery. The woman's family vanished shortly after, and the city's wells dried up. Was this a coincidence, or did her execution unleash a curse? Mesopotamians believed witchcraft could anger the gods, and a wrongful punishment could bring divine wrath. This story, whether true or legend, shows how punishment in Mesopotamia was fraught with risk not just for the victim, but for the entire community. As we weave through these tales, it's clear that brutal punishments were woven into the fabric of Mesopotamian life. Flaying stripped away humanity. Impalement turned victims into symbols of fear. But these acts also left behind mysteries: unnamed rebels, haunted cities, and stories that refused to fade. Why did the Mesopotamians embrace such cruelty? Perhaps it was their way of taming a chaotic world, of asserting order in a land where survival was never certain. Or perhaps, in their quest for control, they unleashed horrors that still resonate in our collective memory. Let's explore one final story, this one from the city of Eshnunna around 1900 BCE. A tablet describes a group of soldiers punished for desertion during a war. They were flayed and impaled, their bodies displayed along the city's main road. But the tablet includes a strange detail. The soldiers' weapons were buried with them, a ritual typically reserved for honored warriors. Why this contradiction? Were the soldiers being punished or honored? Some scholars suggest this was a compromise, a way to appease the gods while punishing the crime. Others believe it was a warning to other soldiers. Even valor couldn't save you from the king's wrath. This mystery underscores the complexity of Mesopotamian justice, where punishment was both a practical tool and a spiritual act. Now, as we draw this journey to a close, let's step back and ask, what do these brutal punishments tell us about ancient Mesopotamia? They reveal a society obsessed with order, yet haunted by chaos. They show us kings who ruled as gods, yet feared divine judgment. And they remind us that even in the cradle of civilization, humanity wrestled with its darkest impulses. Flaying and impalement weren't just punishments. They were stories, warnings, and rituals that shaped a world. Their mysteries lost names, cursed cities. Restless spirits linger as echoes of a time when justice was written in blood. If this dive into the brutal punishments of ancient Mesopotamia gripped you, I invite you to join us for more journeys into the shadows of history. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share your thoughts below. What's the most chilling punishment you've heard of? Do you think the Mesopotamians were cruel, or were they just surviving in a brutal world? If you're hungry for more dark history, check out our next video on the torture methods of ancient Egypt, where the sands hide even more secrets. Until then, keep exploring the mysteries that shape our past. Stay curious, Stay brave, and let the stories of history haunt your dreams.